Tuning in tonight. We appreciate that you've taken the time to tune in to watch us. Don't care where you're watching out, work, bathrooms, kitchens, doesn't matter, just as long as you're paying attention to what God has to say tonight. Just kind of a quick preface. Because of the storm that's kind of passed through here, we're getting some glitching on our internet. So just in case it does break down, just please stay online. We'll get it back in, but we're noticing we're getting some glitches here and there, but likely just due to the storm that had passed through today. But so glad you're here. Remember, you can continue to contribute to this ministry financially, prayers, support, all that. But if you want to contribute financially, you can do so on Easy Tithe. That's via the smartphone app, or you can go to the website, easytithe.com, spelled actual Easy Tithe, and search Praise Chapel Fresno. It'll show you which one that you can contribute to. You give to that one, or you can mail in, drop off your tithes or offerings here at the church at our physical address. If you don't know what our physical address is, just Google us. You'll see it. You can drop it off here. We'll make sure it gets to the appropriate personnel to get deposited in a timely manner. We are still on our reservation system for our Sundays. That's been going well. We've been getting great reports from that, although we're seeing it filling up really quickly. It does get posted Sundays at 1 o'clock for the next week's service. So if you're kind of watching for that, we are going to be posting on our Instagram, our social media websites when it opens up, so you guys can go in and reserve. Don't forget, we also have a family room that can seat up to 12 people, and they're all housed together, of course. That can be reserved. I believe we have someone set for this week, but next week it'll be open. So if you have a family that you want to bring in, or you have kids, you're afraid they might make noise, we really could care less. We're just glad that people are meeting back in the church and they're excited about it. But again, we would have a family room available for you. That's a little bit more isolated, a little bit more just privatized to you guys. But again, to reserve, you will have to go to our website, praisechapelfresno.com. Scroll down the home menu. You'll see a button that says reserve. It'll take you all the way over to another website where you can select your seats. Please be mindful. There is a bar up there that will say stage. We are talking about the altars, so the chairs that are closest to the altar will show on there. I just don't want anyone being uncomfortable when they reserve and say, I thought I got in the back, because we Christians love to sit in the back of a church. Just know that you'll see it'll say stage. Just make sure you're making your correct selection. Limited seats available still, but again, we're seeing lots of people logging in, wanting to reserve, so stay tuned for that. But we're still in our short stories, still going through that. I'm just about to wrap up here because we're in our last book. The last book of it is 3 John. It's the third letter of course, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, which are attributed still to the Apostle John, one of the sons of Zebedee, who the mom walked up and she said, I want one son on your right, one on your left. Jesus says, can you bear this cup? Like, we're believing that is actually who John is. Now, this book is only one chapter, 14 verses long. It's 219 words. It took me a whole probably 4 minutes to read it. Always feeling smarter when you walk around and tell people I read a whole book of the Bible. You should read all 5 of them together that we went through, which is Jude, Obadiah, Philemon, and then the 2nd and 3rd John. You can get through those in probably roughly about 20 minutes, and they're great books. And something that we think, or something we believe that God is really saying through these, is that just because it is a short book doesn't mean that God doesn't have something to say. It's been canonized, it's been put into the Bible, which means God has something to say. Now, through each of these letters that John had written, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, he's describing enduring trials, tribulations, persecution, and affliction, but yet he continues to remind believers that the single most important attribute that we should reflect through these times is still love. If those lost in the world are a reflection of what controls them, look at the faces of meth. That substance controls an addict. And if we are to show people what controls us, it would be the love that God has for all of humanity that should be controlling us. So as people see that reflection of us, they would see God. John reminds us to reflect that which we are surrounded by, protected, and filled, and that is the love that God had for all of humanity. When Jesus says in the New Testament, when he says, come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, he doesn't put any kind of criteria to that. He doesn't say you have to believe what I believe. He doesn't say that you have to agree with everything. He doesn't say you have to be from one side of a political party. You have to be one race. You have to be one mindset. He just says, come to me, all who are weary and heavy burdened. Not everyone's going to agree with your faith. Not everyone is going to like you practicing your faith, and there may be some that are angered with the mere fact that you have chosen to be who you are, but none of this changes who can come to Christ. And as Christians, we should see that. We should see that the love that Jesus Christ had for all of humanity had no criteria attached to it. In the time this letter is written, the church was forming, and John didn't want to see a divide between believers over ideologies or outside of their faith, but that if they love one another and all others can grow together. He's saying, despite what others believe, because you have to remember they're under Roman occupation at this time. And they're being really protective about what's going on. But John is telling them, like, through this time, other things are going to attempt to infiltrate the church. Philosophies, other ideologies are going to attempt to come in. He doesn't say you have to stop them from coming in. He says you have to show them love. So he's saying, despite what they believe, despite what they're doing against us, you still have to love and welcome them into a church, welcome them into the body of Christ, despite what they believe, despite what they hold against you, despite all that. He says you welcome them into the church, you show them love, you reflect it, and things will happen. Now, the 3 letters that John writes were important to date at which they were written. So there's these 3 stages of the formation of the church that begin to happen. Can you turn down channel 20 for me a little bit? There are 3 different time periods, 3 different phases that the church goes through, and the first one, of course, is through Jesus' lifetime. So this is about 0 to about 33 AD. Then you look at the expansion of the gospel after Jesus's crucifixion and resurrection. The faith begins to go through this expansion. So it's just basically growing out in all areas. But then the third phase that begins to happen, which happens right around 60 AD to about 100 AD, this is when we've spread, but now we have to unify. So as we've reached out, as we've reached lost, they were brought back to this point of unification. They're brought back to this point where they're saying, this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and we are one body. Despite the distance that we're separated by, we're one body. And the letters that John writes in this last period are basically, they're shown as the formation and the unification of the ecclesial church. So he's basically given rules and regulations and what they should do. And all 3 of those letters all speak about the love of God. Now, the church was facing huge issues. It's looking at the persecution of Christians by the Roman government. Heresy begins to infiltrate the church. Especially, it's really the philosophy. It's the philosophies that the Roman education system comes out of. That's what really begins to infiltrate. So they're giving great human philosophy, but some of it is just not really lining up. But people are willing to adapt to philosophy more than they were willing to adapt to the faith. So John is really trying to make sure that it doesn't affect the unification of the ecclesial church. Now, so we're gonna jump into 3 John. So we're gonna start with 1:1, and he starts it this way: the elder to my dear friend Gaius, whom I love in truth. Just as he does in 2 John, he's not directly pointing himself out. He's calling himself the elder, but he does mention this Gaius. And that was something he didn't do in his previous letter, where he tries not to really mention any one person, but it's really hard for us to determine who this Gaius actually is. We're not sure if this is a Gaius that was mentioned in Acts. There's one mentioned in Corinthians, and I also believe in Romans there's a mention of a Gaius. But this could be the same Gaius, but we're not actually sure. We're not able to pinpoint this because Gaius is a lot like, the name John today. It's a very common name in the Roman realm. Gaius just happened to be the basic like John of their time. So it's really hard to determine who that is, but that's not really important. We're going to keep going ahead. We're looking at verses 2 and verses 3. Now he says this: dear friend, I pray that you may enjoy good health and that all may go well with you, even as your soul is getting along well. It gave me great joy when some believers came and testified about your faithfulness to truth, telling how you continue to walk in it. So, At first, John is just giving a basic, it's nothing really impactful. He's wishing Gaius well. He's just saying, I hope everything's going well for you, blah, blah, blah. He wants to make sure he's in. But then he says this to the reader. He throws this in. He says, believers came and testified about your faithfulness, how you continue to walk in it. See, John already knows what Gaius is having to go through. He already knows that in their world that they're having to face persecution, they're having to face all these trials. But he begins to praise Gaius for sticking to and holding on to the truth and continuing to walk in truth. I personally think that's something that we as believers lack a great deal of. It's this type of mentality. It's praising another believer when they're sticking to the faith. See, we can get so good when someone comes to us and starts saying, I'm really going through it in my life. We're so good to listen and kind of interject our ideas and interject and say, well, we think this is what you should do. You need to read your Bible. You need to pray. But here John tells Gaius, I know you're going through it, but oh my God, you're doing the right thing. You're coming to church. You're reaching out to those that can help you in faith. He's praising him for the fact that he's holding to the truth. And I think that's something that we kind of lack here today. Someone comes to us with the very first thing out of our mouth is like, you've done the right thing by walking into a church, by reaching out to someone, a fellow believer that can guide you in the ways of truth, that can guide you in the ways of God. It's not wrong for us to give our opinions, to help someone, to counsel. But look, John points this out right here. He says, when someone's suffering through trials, guess what? The world is waiting for them just as much as the Christian world is. If we're not here, someone comes to it. If we're not able to guide, if we're not able to help, the world is out there ready to separate. And one of the best things that we can do is acknowledge that someone has made the right choice in coming to a church, in coming to a fellow believer and reaching out. I'm just as guilty of that. When someone starts talking, I immediately start thinking what scripture, what this, what that, and I never really tell them you've done the right thing or good for you for sticking to faith. Like it first off, it helps solidify our sound and our faith when we see that fellow believers are having the same problems that we may be having, and yet they still continue to stick to the faith. And that pumps me up to say that if they can go through this and I can help them through this, then I know that there is nothing that we can't face together as a body. But the first thing John says is, he says, we're going to acknowledge you're doing the right thing first. Yeah, you may have fallen, but you're coming to church. You may have fallen, but you're reaching fellow believers for advice. You're reaching others that can help guide you and keep you on truth. And that's something I think we need to learn, and we need to really do is the true test of our faith. Our troubles do require recognition. We can't just tell someone that's not a problem or don't worry about that, don't do this. You tell them you've done the right thing by coming to church. You have made the best decision of your life by coming to a fellow believer. And I know you're going through hard times, and acknowledge the trouble. And that's what John's doing. He says, I know you've been through it, but you're doing the right thing by holding and sticking to truth. See, you can't change the perspective of one's outlook. You can change someone's perspective on the outlook of their circumstances with the very first thing out of your mouth. Do we empower fellow believers? Do we encourage one another through their trials today? Because look, what they're going through today becomes their testimony for tomorrow. And are we encouraging? Are we empowering people? Are we letting them know if they've done the right thing by coming to church? Because sometimes, I'm going to be honest, most people that have come to me with problems outside of church, they really aren't looking for advice. They're looking for an ear. They're looking for someone just to listen. And when you acknowledge someone and say, you're doing the right thing, I'm telling you, that changes their perspective. Because the first thing we think of when we're going through trials is we've done something wrong. You put them back on the path and say, you've done the right thing by coming to me. You've done the right thing by coming to a church. You've done the right thing by reaching out to fellow believers. And then John 3:1-4 says this, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children are walking in the truth. See, where are we going to figure in someone's testimony of their life? Are we going to be what they have to overcome? Or are we going to be the springboard, the support system into their victory? Because John says there is no greater joy than to see a believer hold to and act on their faith. And I'm going to be honest, when someone comes to me, I want to be that springboard. I want to be the support system that sees them reach the victory that God has given them. I never want to be something that someone has to overcome to find their direction. And John's saying that here. He knows that Gaius has a call. He knows that Gaius is doing the right thing, and he wants to acknowledge it first. And then he wants to say, I want to play an integral role in your testimony for tomorrow by supporting what you're doing, by continuing to build you up, by continuing to encourage you to hold to the faith. 1:5, he says, Dear friend, you are faithful in what you are doing for the brothers and sisters, even though they're strangers to you. This is an extremely impactful verse here that is kind of situated in this really weird area. So what is John talking about right here? He's talking about the hospitality of the church. They are strangers to you, but yet you are faithful in what you are doing to people that you didn't even know. That may seem so trivial to us. A lot of times we just think like church just happens. People just come to church. They know what to expect. But John here says hospitality towards all who walk into the doors of the church or engage with the church is love in action. Let's read 6-8 because it delves a little bit deeper into this. So he says, verse 6, it says, they have told the church about your love. Please send them on their way in a manner that honors God. Verse 7, it was for the sake of the name that they went out, receiving no help from pagans. Verse 8, we ought to therefore to show hospitality to such people so that we may work together for truth. So people read this and they say this has a lot to do with evangelism, with people that are in faith. Their main support system was basically from church to church. If this was the office that they occupied as an evangelist or as a speaker, they would go from place to place, and that's how they made a living. That's how they survived through their time. So he's telling them people are going to come, show them honor. But really, John is listing a few warnings here. Number one, he's saying people talk. He says how you treat others that walk through your doors is talked about outside the church. It spreads, and here John says, you've shown love, and they speak about the very same love that you've shown them. We honor God with our love and how we treat people when we gather. Number two, he says if they don't get it from the church, they're going to get it from the world. The enemy is readily waiting to guide people away from and further away from the church, and it only moves them further away from God. See, sometimes we can see, and I can see this, a lot of people thinking like hospitality can be taken advantage of. Or you may think it goes to waste, but John says that we're building regardless of how it's received. We're guiding others through love, and everyone that is watching, all the effort that we're putting into others, they're going to begin to see the value of love, and you'll begin to be the example for others to follow. And I noticed that about hospitality. When you right now, because of the regulations that are in place, going to stores has been kind of a drag on people. People are getting upset about things. And one thing I've noticed is there's been a few stores that have taken their hospitality to the next level. And what you begin to see is the stores around them begin to follow suit because they see other individuals are having a pleasant experience while they're having to endure. And we're just here letting people in. We're stopping people, we're telling people you need to hurry, you need to get out, but yet they change their hospitality values and they begin to see that more people begin to show up. And it's not because you're giving them anything differently, it's just because of your attitude towards others that walk through here. And John is saying people have come and have told you, and they've been a burden on you, they've required being taken care of, and yet you've shown hospitality, you've shown love in action, and they walk outside the church and begin to speak to all who hear them about the love that you showed them. Verses 9 and 10. It gets a little dark right here. John kind of turns a corner and he says, I wrote to the church, but Diotrephes, who loves to be first, will not welcome us. So when I come, I will call attention to what he's doing, spreading malicious nonsense about us. Not satisfied with that, he even refuses to welcome other believers. He also stops those who want to do so and puts them out of the church. Now, John names this the Diotrephes. He's naming him as like the bad example. I'm going to go a little bit deeper into this. So he's one who's always pushing his own agenda and speaking against a church in order to make his own work look better. And he begins to work against the very church that sent him out by causing division within it by building himself up. Look, red flags should abound when you're speaking, when you're listening to someone who's trying to build themselves up or has a personal agenda that they're trying to put across. There really should be some red flags there. You know, we have to know that everything, and we've said it before, almost through this entire 5 books, is that if it doesn't line up with the Word of God, then it isn't true. So you got to be careful of that, because sometimes people are going to come by and they're going to tickle your ear and they're going to tell you the best things that you want to hear. But look, they may have no interest in your life or your walk with God. Their only interest is building what they want you to do in their own personal agenda. So here he's talking about division within the church, but he says division came from a form with this Diotrephes. He says it came in the form of pride. The very thing that changed angels into demons seems to be the issue with Diotrephes. And this is the genesis of all sin. And he mentions it. He says, one who loves to be first, someone who always wants to be seen, one who wants to be out in front, and who craves that others build him up, who craves people, who just surrounds themselves with people that will tell them you're doing the right thing, regardless of what they're doing. And in recent days, we've seen some prominent leaders within other churches kind of fall away to sin. And the very first thing that you start noticing is they start surrounding themselves with people that make them feel better about the condition they're in. They stop listening to the people that are there speaking warning and speaking what God is telling them. They begin to surround themselves with people that are there just to tell them you're doing the right thing. Like, oh, it doesn't matter what's there. People don't understand you're doing the right thing. And I think one of the strongest things that a leader can do is surround themselves with people that are going to guide them, that are going to provide counsel, whether they like it or not, are going to provide counsel in an area that says that may not work, or you may be going off a path there. And that's what John's saying. He's saying this Diotrephes, that's all he did. He surrounded himself with yes men, and they walked him down a path, and now he's building his own thing. He's speaking out against our church, and he doesn't even welcome other believers. Look, when you're in the dark, when you have people surrounded in the dark, the last thing you want is light to walk back in and begin to illuminate what you're doing. So when you start seeing people saying, oh, you're from that church, like maybe you should try another place. Maybe you should look somewhere else. Another red flag there. John says the church is not immune to the pride of individuals, but the use of puts them out of the church. He's referring to how power or control of leaders of the church is exercised. He's saying this one man is using his own ideologies, his own beliefs, and he's saying, I want you, my leadership, to do this. And they follow suit. Is it utilized to build the church up, or is it utilized against fellow believers? And that's, John mentions that kind of flat out here. He says, we're trying to build a church, and he's going against believers. So your good example is this Gaius who's building his church, who's protecting his church, and then you have the Diotrephes who's basically using it. He's using his power, his influence, and control against fellow believers. John 1:11 says, dear friends, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. Anyone who does what is good is from God, and anyone who does what is evil has not seen God. See, John is warning the church. He gives the 2 examples. One, a loving, a caring, a hospitable church that continues to grow and move forward towards the destiny that God has placed before them. And the second one, it's a group of people that are surrounded by and being led by an individual's pride. And he says, don't imitate it. If they're growing, don't imitate what you see, what you may think is good, because God doesn't even see them. Because if they're being led by the pride of an individual or individuals, God doesn't see. He says, do what is good, and God will continue to guide you towards your destiny. See, we don't have to look at other places and say, well, we want to be like that. We want to be like that. We want to be like that. God says, I'm going to bring out of you what I've already placed inside. But all you have to do is continue to hold to the truth. But he says, when we hold to truth, we still show the hospitality and we still love everyone that walks through the door, despite what they believe, what they think. And John is just underlining that with each passage. We don't care what they believe. We love them. We don't care what they come in for. We show them the hospitality that God showed us when he provided a sacrifice for all of humanity. Despite our beliefs, despite anything that we hold, God provided it without any specific criteria for us to check, just that we come to the name of Christ and we repent of our sins. Verse 12. It says, Demetrius is well spoken of by everyone, and even by the truth itself. We also speak well of him, and you know that of the testimony is true. Now, Demetrius, who's this? He starts bringing up names again. He's probably a good dude, but otherwise, I mean, he wouldn't be in John's letter if he wasn't a good dude. But John is saying that this is a man whose testimony speaks for itself. Someone who is so faithful that the truth that is his life becomes a testimony to others. That's the way we should live. We should live like Demetrius. We should live to where others say, just look at his life. Look at what has changed and be like him. Because whatever he did, God is using. Be like him. Follow Demetrius' path. Follow what he's doing because God is using him. It doesn't say Demetrius is walking around and saying, you follow me, you follow me. People are choosing to follow this man because his testimony, his life, what God is doing through him speaks for itself. And John is saying that. He's saying, look, you know, you're a great guy, guys. You're building a church. You've been through it. You're doing the right thing. This other guy, Diotrephes, he's a bad guy. He's following his pride. He's speaking against other churches. And then you have Demetrius, who he's saying people are following just because God is moving through his life. And he's telling guys, this is someone you want to bring in because others will begin to see it. They'll begin to feel it without him even opening his mouth, that God is doing something through this man's life. God brings so many examples like that into our lives. We just got to we got to keep our eyes open. We got to stay woke because I'm telling you, when God brings people into our lives, a lot of time we really don't pay attention to it because it's just another person or it's just another speaker or it's just another leader. But God is saying that there are people that I bring amongst you that their testimony speaks for itself. What I'm doing through their lives changes others just simply by them being who I've called them to be. Verses 13 and 14, he kind of echoes the very ending that he did in 2 John. He says, I have much to write you, but I do not want to do so with pen and ink. I hope to see you soon, and we will talk face to face. Peace to you. The friends here send their greetings. Greet the friends by their name. He's talking about friends being around. He's saying surround yourself with people that not only encourage, love, and support you, but with people that bring peace to your lives. Even in the most difficult of times of our lives, we should always surround ourselves. We should always have a sense of peace. And that peace that is strengthened by those we choose to connect with in our lives. In summary, the letter basically tells us that we have to be a good example for one another, but we have to be a good example for people that are just watching us. Let me tell you, there are people, they're just watchers. Most people are going to be watchers. They're not going to be interactors. They're just going to watch what you're doing. And when we show that level of hospitality through a church, through our own personal lives to other individuals, people are watching and they see it and they can sense the testimony of your life and they begin to wonder, they begin to mimic, they begin to want the same thing. They'll follow, but they're watching. And a lot of times, on behalf of all millennials, I'll apologize for this. We want to see the value in what you do before we choose to follow you, so we watch closely. Others are watching us so closely how we're operating. We chose to open the church back up at specific times, and we've done so knowing that people are watching and looking at what we're doing. And we want to show, number one, not only are we being prudent, not only are we being smart, but we're taking into consideration that we want to show a level of hospitality to those that choose to follow. And others are watching, I'm telling you. We're hearing reports back. We're hearing of people just reaching out beyond their own. They're looking for people to come because they see the hospitality that is being shown, the love that this church is showing towards individuals that just show up, that towards individuals that we want to see their lives change. We want to see God make an impact in their lives, and they're looking at the hospitality we're showing. Because let me tell you, I haven't heard anything of why did you open? Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? I've heard nothing, but you can tell this church loves people. because of the way you're reacting, because of the way you're interacting, because of what you're doing, because they can see the dedication that those that serve have. They can see the love of those that come to church, that we have a great love for one another, but we also have a great respect for one another in the space that we have to give one another at this time. But let me tell you, people are watching. And John says that they're not only watching, but they're leaving your church and they're talking about it. And we don't want to be a hurdle for someone's life that they have to get through. We want to be that support system. We want to be something that they say, you have to come see what's happening at Praise Chapel Fresno, because let me tell you, God is on the move there, and you can see it through the testimonies. You can see it through individual lives of people that show up there day after day. So that's 3 John. Those are the 5 shortest books of the Bible. And let me tell you guys, I've studied through this. These are things that have spoken into my own life, have changed my own perspective on what we do, has helped me to guide my own family, to guide those that I do love towards this truth. And so these really were the 5 shortest books, and they had some very impactful things to say. Continue to read them, continue to study in them. If you have questions, direct message us. But we really appreciate you guys tuning in tonight. I hope it wasn't too glitchy because of the storm that was happening. But you can continue to support this ministry via Easy Tithe. You can do that on your smartphone, or you can go to easytithe.com, search Praise Chapel Fresno. You can continue to contribute financially, or you can go to praisechapelfresno.com. In the upper right-hand corner, there's a menu. You can click that, go down to a button that says Give. It'll take you to a safe and secure website where you can continue to financially contribute. You can also give here at our physical address, whether you've reserved and you've shown up. We have a system in which you can give here, or you can drop off, mail in your tithes, your offerings here at the church. We love those that are driving by and dropping it off and telling us how much they miss being here. I know we're at limited seating. We're going to work on a few things here to see what we can do about that. But right now, we're still in the reservation system, so keep your eyes open for our social media when we post it up. It's filling up quick, you guys, and we're going to work on a few things to see what we can do about that. But again, we love you guys. We thank you so much for tuning in, for all the support, the prayers, the words of encouragement. Let me tell you, the words of encouragement that people are texting after a service, that's the stuff that really fuels us. That's the stuff that we just read out to anyone that can hear us, that we talk about, is just people telling us what they thought, people telling us what God's doing through their own lives, even through the isolation we've had to go through. That is more invaluable to me than I can ever tell you. But we love you guys. We miss you. Those that reserved, we'll see you at 10 a.m. Few seats left. And when I say few, I'm talking 2 seats left. Feel free to go in and to reserve them if you choose to do so. But other than that, we'll see you live casted Sunday at 10 a.m. Those that reserve, we'll see you in person. Seating begins at 9:25, ends at 9:50. Service begins promptly at 10 o'clock. We love you. We'll see you then.